Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Engineering Weekly Radio. We are here with another great discussions about all the articles being featured in Data Engineering Weekly. This week, we are going to talk about Data Engineering Weekly edition 124. Very, lot of interesting articles being published on 124. Ashwin with us here, as usual, can discuss about all the articles. Hi, Ashwin.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well.
Yeah, awesome. Let's jump on our analysis. So the first interesting article being published on 124 is the state of analytical engineering as a comprehensive survey done by DBT, and the survey of pains and gains and area of investment for global data teams. There are a lot of very interesting insights came out of this analytics. I can see DBT is actually acting on top of it right now. So, what do you think of this analysis?
I think great start to the episode. State of analytical engineering, something that's a term that has only been there for a little less than 3 years. And DBT, with their strength of community of over 50,000 plus people, or close to that number, has done quite a decent survey. I think it was responded around by little less than 600 odd people. And I think a very comprehensive kind of a survey that focuses on some of the key themes that people are investing on for this year and beyond, right? So there are 5 areas that they have summarized on. So we'll go through that one by one, but I think this is a publicly available survey response. 567 odd people had responded to it. So great survey.
Totally.
Start with the first one.
Yeah, totally. I think they kind of shared the high level learning, like a top 5 learning. They kind of share like 46% of our responders plan to invest more in data quality and observability this year. And number 2 is like lack of coordination between the data producer and data consumer, perceived by all responders by this year as a top threat to the ecosystem. And number 3 is like data engineers and analytic engineers are most likely to believe they have clear goals. I think this is a very interesting thing. Like it has 3. I think once we do a deep detail analysis, we can touch base on that. Number 4 is like 71% of the responders rated data team productivity and agility positively. Data ownership ranks the top concern for most of the people, and analytical engineers are most concerned with the stakeholders' needs. 40% they like top concern is data is not where the business users needs to be. Very interesting high level
problem, right? I think this kind of reiterates what we typically go through in the data space. I think this is not just for this year. The numbers and the percentages may vary, but then even other surveys, even Gartner and all of them have kind of confirmed that data quality and observability is a popular investment area for this year. People have dumped data into warehouses and they're not able to realize the value of it because they've created the dump yard. And I think in one of our earlier episodes, I don't remember which episode, I think I use this example of how garbage collection works. You have to move left as much as possible to the source collection at the first point of collection, because segregation at source is the best method of garbage avoidance and better recycling capabilities. Data also follows a similar pattern. So I think quality observability is going to be a very popular trend. I think like Anand suggested, the second one, the coordination or the producer-consumer problem is actually a much bigger problem, and that's a cause of concern. Let's go deeper into this. This is what data contracts are promising to solve. I think all of these problem statements are something that most of the people listening on this call will resonate with. And very interestingly, I think it's been reinforced by the team that is working on or with DBT today.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the things that I kind of very interesting to find out, like the data analysis and data engineers, the role kind of also very confused in this case. I think this is still going on, in my opinion, because a lot of surveys they kind of taking out. Many people identify them as a data engineers, many people identify the data analysts. But if you see the distribution of their voting, their pain points, everything is remaining the same. That's a very interesting take, I thought, in this case.
Yeah,
And
very
especially,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. I think, in fact, if I were to, they did a survey around the fact that how data engineers align mobile function, and analysts and analytical engineers tend to embed in business areas.
Mhm,
Right, and if I look into the percentages of people with a business area focus, and then just combine that
mhm,
numbers and see 63% of people are either doing data engineering or analytical engineering work, 64% rather. It shows a
mhm,
significant number in terms of team size. And the data
mhm,
scientists are, and the data analytics manager and data analysts are the remaining 35 or 40 odd percent. Right. So
mhm.
I think a fair survey, and the numbers really represent the fact that that's how an ideal team composition is looking like for most companies
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. The survey kind of goes again, like next to this next section. They kind of taking about the compensation point of view. I think
Yeah,
one of the interesting thing they kind of mention about, like most of the data analytical engineers tend to get more salary than the data analyst. So that's something like people wanted to kind of take a look at it. And there's an interesting comparison of how the salary distribution going from North America to Europe to Asia.
yeah,
And if you see historically, the Asia tend to have a much lower salary between the Europe and North America. But in this survey, the 87% of analytical engineers and 68% of North American data engineers taking more than 100K,
yeah,
versus it's very important, very hard for European counterparts to kind of reach the 100K dollar mark, versus 53% of analytical engineer respondents in APAC countries make more than 100K. And 25% of the data analysis and 20% of data engineers reach same compensation level as of it, right? So I see this is a global shift of things. Uh, I also think that it is an indication that the APAC market is a self-sufficient on its own. We've seen like an explosion of a lot of startups, especially the consumer side of it. I think this salary level and also this market says that there is a market is higher than the Europe in the APAC. That's my interpretation. I don't know. Like you are on the field, Ashwin, so you know better than me. What do you think?
well, I think I totally agree with you. I think APAC as a market has grown again. I'm What DBT should have done is separated out India, Philippines from Asia, because India and
Mm-hmm.
Philippines still are has a larger services market as well. So I'm not sure if
Mm-hmm.
the reports could have gotten skewed. But then Singapore, Australia, and some of the other countries have a higher pay packet, on
Okay.
par with the US. I'm not sure, that specific is not given in the survey, so not really sure. But then,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me on ground, I think even the data salaries in Indian ecosystem has grown up, and
Right.
I would say it's on par largely for the top data engineers with the East Coast of the US in some of the roles, and I say on par just for PPP and all of that. So it's quite a decent number that we're talking about, even
Mm-hmm.
in offshore centers like India.
Yeah.
But then that also comes from the fact that the market in India has a lot of startups these days, who are
Mm-hmm.
solving for scalable problems, because the population of the country is
Mm-hmm.
1.4 billion in terms of volume. So the volume of data generated is high, and you need
Mm-hmm.
super sophisticated skill sets, particularly data engineers, data analysts, data analytical engineers. I think all of these
Mm-hmm.
folks are becoming a prime focus, because these are all tech companies where data is their business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think market conditions are also improved. So because one batch of people get a crazy salary, the other batch catches up. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a trickle effort that's happening, and I think agree with DBT. Now, one
Yeah.
part I think that I liked in the survey is where what best describes and how you spend most of the time. A significant portion of people's time is spent still on maintaining platforms and maintaining
Yeah.
data sets.
Right.
Right, rather than actually doing work, they are more focused on maintaining platforms and maintaining data sets. I'm still
Right.
surprised with that numbers that I see here, 42 and 66.
Right.
What's your point on
Yeah.
that?
Maybe too many DBT model to maintain. I don't know.
Oh yeah, could be.
So could be. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that is true. I think that is essentially showing the fundamental nature of it. That lot close to the if you think the other section of the if you see the other section of the data, the survey result about what do you find most challenging while preparing data for analysis. The number one or two things I think about: poor data quality, ambiguous data ownership, inconsistent data collection, and managing docs and dependencies.
Yeah,
And so it's all goes hand in hand. I think what people thinking while maintaining data assets, while creating a table is one part. The moment you materialize something, then you have to have an ongoing work to kind of maintain the same quality what it's supposed to be. The data is a very highly dynamic in nature, and anything can go wrong in the upstream that can yield your poor data quality. So yesterday's great, excellent data quality product, it doesn't mean that today will be also going to remain the same. So it is not going to be remaining static. And a lot of inconsistent, ambiguous data ownership can come into play. It can spoil everything. So maintenance is going to be the major work.
correct. Yeah, I think I would say inconsistent data collection would not happen if you move all the way left and determine what we want in a specification. You then avoid data quality, and when you're establishing contracts, ownership is well documented. There's no
Right.
ambiguity over there. And that basically means that managing dependencies and creating a central doc and thereby
Yeah.
improving the stakeholder data literacy
Right.
becomes a lot more easier, helping customers increase their agility to drive decision making, right? Speed to business
Right.
insights. I think that's the part. I think whatever statements I just made, I'm not making it up. I'm just reading it from the
Yeah.
graph and the template and the survey results that
Yeah.
TBT has
Yeah. Yeah.
shared. But if
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
boil down the problem just lies in data quality and nothing else. And we need to
Yeah.
move left. We need to ensure it's documented. There is a contract in place. Everything boils down to that, right? Define
Yeah.
ownership.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm kind of sliding a little more down, like because it's very relevant to what you're talking about is here, like the data. So there is one of the topic there, kind of this like one of the survey they asked about, like what are the biggest problems still facing the modern data stack. 50% of the people is saying that lack of data contract is a bigger problem for them. So there is a huge correlation between high number of maintenance is work that we do
Yeah.
because of this fundamental nature of the data is because we don't have a data contract. I think this is kind of well connecting everything. And it's also worth to note that today morning, as we are recording today, on the April 19th, DBT announced from their next release, they're going to release a data contract feature part of the DBT. So this is kind of coming, everything come together. So we've been talking about data contract for many times. Several people kind of told it's a buzzword, and I'm finally, at least people comes to some sense and say like, okay, hey, here is something that we should really take a look at it. Super glad to that one.
Yeah, and I think finally they have around a roadmap around my organization sets clear goals for the data team, and they have a roadmap to execute. Uh, Actually, 41% only agree to that, and everybody else is either no agreement or disagreement, and somewhat agreement or somewhat disagree, right? Largely, so I think still a lot of definitions around what does this role mean, and what is a deliverable, what's the KPI, and all of that is still not fully understood by the customers themselves. I think I like the terms analytical engineers, data analysts, and them. I don't understand the difference. There's still a big ambiguity around that, because most of the time people who are doing data analysts double down as analytical engineers. There's a clear demarcation when it comes to data engineers, because they do the heavy plumbing, heavy transformation, etc. But analytic engineers are not expected to do that. They're working more with the business isn't that what a data analyst is also expected to do? Not still not very clear, but then I know DBT has been successful in defining the role of the analytical engineer or analytics engineer as such.
Yeah, I mean, 80% of a data science work is a data engineering work anyway. So I would say like there will be some correlation, but like there some will be a overlap between analytical engineering and data engineering. Depends upon our organization size, depends upon the maturity level of company. The overlapping is inevitable, in my opinion.
Yeah. Finally, again, I don't know why we end up talking data contracts every time. I'm sorry for bringing that up, but I don't know. We don't choose the topic or we don't control the survey results of DBT. When we had asked people around what are the biggest problems still facing the modern data stack and what is it that people can build. So one was metadata sharing, team collaboration, building data contracts, learning curve and all that. So contracts scored one of the second highest, only next to best practices. See, best practices and answer could have come from people who have been using DBT, but contracts is very unique here, which basically establishes the control, moves left, helps in documenting, preventing bad data from even entering in the first place. Right. So I think that's very interesting here.
Yeah. I think the lack of best practices or tools is a very interesting thing. I think the today's announcement of DBT is a very first opinionated view of DBT kind of entering. This is how you are going to build a multimodal, right? Airflow, highly unopinionated. DBT, highly unopinionated. So you have like bunch of generalized tools that is not an opinionated tools that if like any tools can come in and do anything.
Yeah.
I think that causes like a lot of fragmentation. I'm really glad like DBT taking the step to kind of bring in this opinionated view into the system. That will be an interesting thing. I think I agree with the cross-data tool metadata sharing. I think we'll be talking more about it later. I think in moving forward and coming discussion, I think this is some of the things is going to be a bigger challenge in the data industry coming forward. At what kind of metadata you should share? Like how do you share it? Is it an intercompany, intra-company, and a lot of other interesting challenges around that particular thing. Yeah. We are not talking about data catalog here. We're just talking about the metadata here. So that's or overall, what do you think of this results? And is it aligned with what is your prediction or the perception about the industry?
I think so, and it kind of reflects what we as an industry have been going through for the last 2 or 3 years, heavily towards the last 2 or 3 years, because I believe we as a generation have created systems with unlimited scale, but still that's not enough, and we will improve that by miles ahead from where we are today. But Snowflake, Databricks, they've seen adoption, and now people are using DBT and other tools, depending on the maturity of the company. But then problem statement has remained the same through the years. The salary packets, again, I think a representation of what the market is getting currently, and some of the key things that DBT has highlighted as products that they can potentially build or gaps identified in the product. I think like Anand did share today, they are launching something around that as well. So interesting. Let's closely watch DBT as they pivot and have a greater influencing power in the modern data stack world.
Yeah, totally. I think next article is also kind of very close to DBT, but they're talking about ChatGPT, LLM, and the future of DBT and analytical consulting. This is a very interesting perspective I have hearing it. What is the future of analytical engineering and the given of LLM? I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using Google Pod, I'm using GitHub Copilot to write my code every day. And I see like huge productivity gain, in my opinion. Now, what does it mean for a consulting people? And then a lot of things that we are talking about here, like, maintenance side of it, lack of documentation side of it, code readability perspective, data contract perspective, those interface definition. If you feed those information into LLM, I believe LLM can write a better code than a consultant.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
Probably. And I love this article by Ritman Analytics as well, right? And how they navigate around instructing ChatGPT to basically say, hey, guys, go and create a schema for me for my data lying
Yeah.
on top of a warehouse. Now, obviously, as the first part was traditional, something that some of you may be already be aware of, it was able to create a table structure with the conditions, and I think based on your interactions with with the AI offering, you're able to modify the schema and create the gating conditions as well. Now, interestingly, what the author basically then puts out to use is to generate a DBT model instead of a SQL code that is already generated, or the SQL table that was already generated. Right, so that's very interesting. How ChatGPT, all the LLMs are then being able to generate code, and because of its vector database and all that, it can understand the previous conversation. So there was a schema created, the code for DBT is generated now, which brings me to the $1 million question here: is it the death of data engineers? Do you really need people to do this?
Yeah. I think I'm just kind of curious to think about, right? In the future, the companies might ask, may ask like, I don't know, I want a DBT consultant. They might ask like, the prompt engineer for DBT, for example,
Oh yeah.
who know how to write a prompt query to create
Oh
a
yeah.
DBT code and test it and debug it. Right, so the prompt engineering might be an interesting skill for a DBT to do that one. The interview process might be tuned towards prompting, for example. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Probably they'll make
Possible.
people prompt live
Yeah.
chats. Like, why don't you create a prompt for us, and then we'll
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of solving binary tree, write a prompt to produce or join these two tables and produce a DBT table using ChatGPT and write a test case for that. That could be a good
yeah.
interview process. I don't know.
So I think the use cases are going to be unlimited. Just what Ritman has tried in this particular
Yeah.
blog, they've
Right.
kind of converted a SQL code into a compatible DBT code. This is super powerful. Even if it can give you the wireframe of your code, like how Git Copilot also does, it kind of accelerates the developer time. Period. Right. So with this, I can actually go and even if I don't have any idea of how the DBT syntax work, given a SQL, given a data model, I can go out and generate a DBT code, which may not be fully working, but I see that as a starting point today. Now they've created an experienced Charo Winkler, which is not a library that's already available in BigQuery, and that's a limitation, right? Probably the tool will overcome that in the next releases or the next couple of releases. But definitely it's lacking context when it comes to advanced questions or being able to relate on certain points, but that's okay. By and large, it's a wonderful product. It's able to do and accelerate what a 2+ year engineer would be able to operate at 8+ year of experience, or probably a fresher out of college can operate at a mid-level experience with open AI tools being built and embedded as part of the day-to-day flow. Right. In fact, if somebody does not have ChatGPT access in their laptop, or the company is saying no, but just buy yourself one user license the moment you're hitting the API limits, or if you want to showcasing it to people.
Yeah, totally. How ChatGPT is going to impact programming? It's already impacting programming. It's interesting to see how it's going to impact the consulting side of it. It's a very interesting things to watch for it.
Yeah. But one thing is sure, right? It is not complete. It will do mistakes, and you need to be intelligent enough to understand the mistakes. So there's no excuse for not knowing basics and using just LLMs. That's a bad strategy. But then if you're using LLMs, then just use that to enrich your code, get your development time shortened, understand and ask questions around, hey, I've done this code, how do I deploy it? So ChatGPT is able to help you with all of that, because it's all documented that are available in the public domain that it's able to pass and draw context of it.
Right. I think in earlier, like you spend 1 hour coding and 1 hour debugging and then deploying. Now you will be spending like a 5 minutes maybe coding, but you still need to spend like 1 hour to debug and deploy. So it's still going to remain the same.
Totally. I think,
Yeah, at
But
least
then,
that's my
but then
experience so
you
far.
get better standardized code because you can apply standardization and tell them.
Yeah,
Fantastic blog, actually
yeah,
talking about how DBT works within.
yeah, totally. I think the next article is also a very interesting kind of things. Like it's very close to contract side of it, like more of a standardizing the schema. Wix write about how Wix managing schemas, but Kafka used by 2,000 microservices. First thing I was like, 2,000 microservices, that's really great. Um, Very good. But the blog is kind of a very interesting thing. They're talking about, what is the importance, like why you need to have this standardization of API and schema. They had a separate blog about it, like, why we kind of move with an approach and the adoption of protocol buffer as a interface definition language as a format to define and exchange the contract between two different microservices here. And they're talking about how they kind of use confluent schema registry to discover the schema and the entire architecture they kind of describe about it. And they automatically create like a Wix documentation out of it. That's very
Yeah,
interesting things to do that. Yeah.
totally. I think a great blog. For me, this was a great introduction to how protobuf and all of that kind of works with the different tools. Again, they are using Confluent schema registry to register the schema. This is a pretty bit a straightforward exercise, but then they were not able to completely implement on top of just the Confluent schema registry. They've followed different approaches. They've used Photograph and kind of merged it with Kafka Q, right? So yeah, that's pretty much their approach. Now, one of the things that definitely Protobuf does, it's you have a flexible schema, right? So and you can enforce it based on your business requirements. So I think that's a good choice if they're implementing using Kafka as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the major advantages of systems like Protobuf, Thrift, and Avro, they enforce a compile time validation of your data types. If it is a string, it has to be a string. If it's double, if it's double. There's no like you define some integer, but it's coming string. Unfortunately, JavaScript does the type erasure. So if you are using JSON, not JavaScript. So if you are using data instrumentation, you wanted to instrument some events, and then or even your microservice is going to talk to each other. You wanted to produce some events back to data lake. Try to use some kind of a typed ideal systems like Protobuf or Avro or AWS recently have something called Smithy. Very interesting system to look into this one. Try to avoid JSON as much as possible if you have a controlled data. So there are sources that you cannot really control. You have to take whatever they send it. But if you can control your data source, go for the systems like Protobuf or Smithy or Avro in case.
Yeah, I think they're also using Greyhound to overcome some of the limitations that the Java SDK of Kafka would provide, right? So they're using this open source project called Greyhound, and that gives them the flexibility as well. Particularly around parallel message handling, the retry mechanisms for error handling. I think those two are key when they're using Greyhound.
Yeah, totally. It's a very interesting open source project. I never looked into very detail on like how the layer kind of handling this one, but definitely looking forward to look into this.
And it extends and expands on the Java SDK that's available, and these APIs are then available for you with different languages as well. So should be able to do that. Java, Scala, etc. So you should be able to implement that.
Yeah, totally. Very interesting project to look into this one. I'll take a look at this one. Moving on, we have a bonus article to discuss this time. Usually we do 3 articles. Today we thought of taking the 4th one, which is from LinkedIn. Talk about unified streaming and batch pipeline at LinkedIn, reducing processing time by 94% with Apache Beam. So far, I heard Apache Beam being used in like companies like LinkedIn and Lyft, but I never heard like multiple things. but LinkedIn kind of talked about how they integrate Apache Samza and Apache Spark on top of Beam. So you have one unified programming model, and that you can use to target to two different runtime. You can write if it's a batch pipeline, you can run it on Spark. If it is a streaming pipeline, you can run it on Samza. So the application developers don't need to write two different code structure for two different path. This is particularly a bigger thing in if you are adopting something like a Lambda architecture. So
totally.
Yeah. So the Lambda architecture, the curse is like, you have to maintain your batch infrastructure, you have to maintain streaming infrastructure, and you have to write the same business logic and two different things. How do we kind of share? That's kind of a big, system component to maintain. So they kind of adopting this Beam model with a different runner to start it, which is kind of very interesting. What do you think of this, Ashwin? Like, have you seen this is a real challenge with the Lambda architecture somewhere? Like, what do you think of this article?
Yeah, sure. My exposure to Beam is little less than 5 years. So I got introduced to Beam 5 years back, around 2017, 18 time frame, to be 18 to 19 time frame. The first time that I got exposed to Beam, a fantastic project, which I have not seen a lot of adoption of late. Now, the original idea of Beam, and I've spoken to people who had committed to Apache Beam as a project, was to develop an abstraction language or abstracted code that can be used to execute both batch and streaming pipelines. Because at one end, Spark was becoming popular, and another end, Flink was becoming popular back in the day. So there were two different runners, and again, Beam had planned to support multiple runners as well. So they're like, the core logic needs to be abstracted. We generate a Beam code, and then Beam code would support certain set of runners on which the actual code will execute. So Beam had the idea, Beam had the playbook, but I have not seen a wide adoption of Apache Beam, at least in the world that I come from. Right. So pure Beam has lost its charm. I don't know. Spark became quite famous, and people were hardcoding things in Spark. But there are use cases where you have to define a logic that runs both batch and streaming, and LinkedIn is a classic example in this case. So they are using both the runners, and they want to write logic once instead of wasting developers' time, effort, mental frustration. Develop it to handle both batch and streaming, and then choose a runner at runtime, right? And tomorrow, if the runner has to be changed from Samza to a direct Spark runner or to a Flink runner, it would still be supported by Beam because they abstract the code and keep it. Even though it's designed on a visual layer, they can use any runner of their choice as long as the abstracted definitions exist, right? And the Beam code can get generated. Now, the interesting part that the team has also handled is the sources on the left-hand side for both batch and streaming can be different. So they've kind of implemented a pattern by which both of this can happen seamlessly in the same design and the same pipeline as well.
Yeah. And the performance gains they kind of quoted is kind of very encouraging. They're kind of claiming from like this is a Beam unified pipeline reduced from 7 hours to 25 minutes. That's a huge win. And they kind of summarize the unified streaming batch pipeline. They have a following wins: 50% resource reduction, for 94% of processing time saving, less than 50% of resources they use with the unified pipelines. Tremendous boost of engineering productivity. Now you have to write only one code. You don't need to write like a multiple codes here. Very interesting finding.
That's a key thing, And if I'm not wrong, Beam also supports Python as a runner. I have not explored that, but I know
they used to do.
It does. Right. So I've not tested it myself, but I remember seeing that in the documentation a little while back, or not a couple of years back, not a little while. Right. So I think that's a thing. But then end of the day, Beam, what does it do? Help you to have heavy engineer productivity, because you write a code once, run it in different environments, no matter whether it is streaming or batch, the job would run because the code base is definitely the same one, right? And obviously, it's also efficient. There are architectural patterns that you can implement while implementing Apache Beam within your organization. So obviously, yes, the workload, the compute, all of that helps in significant reduction in terms of resources as well.
Yeah, it is going to be very interesting to see because Apache Spark supports streaming and batch on the same programming model, even though the stream processing more of a micro batching, not really like a stream processing essentially. And on the other hand, we see Flink also now support processing batch pipeline from a stream. So it's like there is a unified table abstraction to process a streaming layer. And there's on top of this, the beam is kind of a general runner pattern.
Correct.
And we've seen or emerging like a SQL native streaming pipeline that can potentially support both the use cases, like for example, DuckDB, for example, can also kind of ingest into doing. So there are like several interesting technology evolution happening at this point of time. So it'll be interesting to see where Apache Beam going to play in the picture versus the native integrations of Flink and Spark, and what is the new generation of those systems like DuckDB going to change this model a little bit.
Correct.
It has
the
to.
Idea of Beam is good.
We have to wait and watch.
See, the idea of Beam in general is good, right? So I think that's what everybody's trying to do: become a broking agency that kind of abstracts and create it. So Beam is definitely in the radar, even for the company that I work, Talent. So, but then over here they used the open source version and they got over it. Yeah.
Definitely. So the only way to figure it out is like wait and watch and see how it is going on. And with that, we come to a end of Data Engineering Weekly edition 124. We'll be seeing with 125 soon. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.